Hello, I'm Dr. David L. Katz, Director of Yale University's Prevention Research Center, and we are currently at the PRC, which is located in Griffin Hospital in Derby, Connecticut. I'm an internist and I'm a preventive medicine specialist, and I've combined the two in part because in my clinical activities over the years, taking care of heart disease, diabetes, cancer, stroke, it became very apparent that an awful lot of what puts people in hospital beds doesn't need to happen in the first place. In my research, in the Prevention Research Center, we're focused on strategies to help people eat better, be more physically active to a lesser extent. And some of this is in the area of clinical trials where we actually do interventions to see if we can modify risk factors, interventions in settings that are not traditionally thought of as having much to do with health and health outcomes, such as supermarkets. So we've been focused on a nutritional guidance system which will be implemented in supermarkets around the country. One of the projects that has preoccupied me for the last several years is the development of the Overall Nutritional Quality Index, or Anki. The very short version of this story is this is GPS for the world of nutrition. A dozen of the top nutrition and public health experts in North America came together. We developed a very sophisticated algorithm that factors in over 30 discrete nutritional entries, and that also factors in a great deal of epidemiology, in essence the relationship between nutrients and health outcomes, and puts all that together with a great deal of mathematical engineering for which I'm primarily responsible, and spits out a number. And those numbers are compressed to a scale of between 1 and 100, and so for any food we can generate a number that is the summative, holistic measure of its overall nutritional quality. The higher the number, the more nutritious the food. And although the scale is universal, and so as one would expect and hope, it shows that fruits and vegetables are a lot more nutritious than marshmallows and jelly beans, it stratifies foods within any given category. So, instead of being befuddled and disempowered as you stand in front of the cereal aisle or the bread aisle in the supermarket, they will be in rank order by overall nutritional quality. The higher the number, the more nutritious the bread. So, multi-grain, 7-grain, 12-grain, I don't know, is this marketing hype? Is it real? Can I trust it? You don't have to worry about that. The higher the number, the more nutritious the food. It will take into account the whole grain and the fiber content and the sodium content and the kind of oil used and whether or not there's high fructose corn syrup. If we could get people to not smoke, be physically active, and eat more or less in accord with prevailing guidelines, we could potentially reduce heart disease rates by as much as 80%, diabetes by as much as 90%, cancer by as much as 60%, stunning public health advances. And between them and better choices is this dizzying array of confusing messages, the marketing hype on the front of the package and health claims and the minutia on the back, a long ingredient list and all the details in a nutrition facts panel. Very, very tough to put that all together and answer the question, is this good for me? Is this better for me than the thing sitting on the shelf next to it? Frankly, the very best level of guidance is idiot-proof. You think about a good GPS, you just can't go wrong. Turn here, dummy. It's directions for dummies, and that's a good thing. The Anki is just like that. It is extremely sophisticated under the hood, and I make no apologies about that. And we're projecting that the Anki which is being marketed under the name NuVal, for nutritional value system, will be in between 4,000 and 5,000 supermarkets nationwide in the U.S. by the first quarter of 2009. The Anki is designed in the same way that the dietary guidelines are designed to be a one-size-fits-all. In essence, this is a summative assessment of nutritiousness. It was a simple case of form following function, and the function of this algorithm is to reliably stratify all foods on the basis of overall nutritional quality. And when you think about the array of foods available to all of us, there are an awful lot of subtleties to consider. What about artificial sweeteners? And if you take cheese doodles and put in a 6-day supply of B vitamins, do they get the same score as spinach? What about refined grain versus whole grain? What about foods that may have certain nutritional liabilities but have unique nutritional advantages, like the flavonoid antioxidants in dark chocolate? This is just a short list of the kind of subtleties you have to deal with if you're going to fairly score foods that fill up the average supermarket. So factored into the algorithm are things like the typical list of vitamins: vitamin A, vitamin E, vitamin D, vitamin C, and B vitamins. Minerals such as magnesium and potassium and sodium and calcium. Families of antioxidants such as flavonoids and carotenoids. Fiber. And then we look at some of the things that compromise the nutritional properties of food: additions of salt, sugar, saturated fat, trans fat, dietary cholesterol. Within the fat category, we give special credit to omega-3 fat. We differentiate between monounsaturated, polyunsaturated, and saturated fats. And we have measures of the biological quality of protein, biological quality of fat, and biological quality of carbohydrate. So we have various measures used to capture each of those. And then in a society subject to epidemic obesity, calories count. So we look at the energy density of a food. What you really want to know is, how does the concentration of a nutrient in any given food compare to the recommended concentration of that nutrient in a healthy diet? A diet is made up of foods, and so the foods you choose really matter, but ultimately it's the overall dietary pattern that counts. And if we're supposed to have a certain level of calcium every day, it's the sum effect of foods over the course of the day that matters. If we're supposed to avoid having above a certain amount of sodium over the course of a typical day, it's how each food contributes to the total sodium intake that matters. The upper recommended intake of sodium is 2,400 milligrams. Well, 2,400 milligrams and 2,000 calories is 1.2 milligrams of sodium per calorie. So that would be the upper recommended concentration of sodium. So the Anki asks the question, how does the concentration of salt in a food compare to that? So it takes the sodium in milligrams in a serving of a food, divides by the calories in that serving of food, and divides that by 1.2, and that answers the question, how many times more or less, if you will, salty is this food than a healthy diet should be? So for every nutrient included in the Anki algorithm, we set up a matrix of the conditions with which those nutrients are associated. So for example, trans fat is associated with heart disease. Other things too, but heart disease tops the list. We then asked 3 questions about the nutrient-disease relationship. How important is the disease? And there were 2 questions there. How common is it, and how serious is it? And then one question unique to the association between the nutrient and the disease: how strong is that association? That proves to be a crucial consideration because, for example, dietary cholesterol is associated with heart disease. That's commonly known. But in fact, all of the recent literature would suggest that the relationship between dietary cholesterol and both blood cholesterol levels and heart disease outcomes is a very weak link, as opposed to dietary trans fat, where the association with heart disease risk is quite strong. So we have a weighting coefficient in the Anki for the strength of association that differentiates between such things as trans fat and dietary cholesterol, with trans fat getting a fairly severe penalty and dietary cholesterol getting a much lesser weight. And again, under the hood, a lot going on. User interface, very, very simple. It's not as if we went out of our way to say, let's make sure we factor in brain health and, and the liver and the kidney. We didn't create a list of vital organs and let's say, everybody gets their fair share here, but rather, what are the leading health conditions? What are the leading reasons why we should care? Well, cardiovascular disease is on the short list, and the leading cause of compromise in cognitive function is cardiovascular disease. The fact of the matter is, the old adage is true about the ankle bone and the shin bone, except it's a much bigger connection than that. Everything in the body is interconnected. You can't have a healthy brain if you don't have healthy blood vessels supplying that brain. You can't have a healthy brain if you don't have good stuff in the blood that's flowing through those blood vessels. You can't have a healthy brain if you don't have healthy kidneys filtering that blood. The foods that are so-called brain foods tend just to be extremely wholesome foods. Is it true that blueberries are brain food? Yeah, but blueberries are just plain good for you. They're extremely concentrated nutrients, very rich in antioxidants, very low in calories, and frankly, the same is true of strawberries and most other berries. That said, because there's so much epidemiology built into the Anki, we are in the process of, and will certainly generate, Anki derivatives that are condition specific. So an Anki for diabetes, an Anki for weight loss, an Anki for lipid lowering. All of that is planned and all of that will be rolled out over time. High fructose corn syrup is bad because it's so much like sugar, and it's worse because it's so ubiquitous and used in such copious amounts. The growth of corn is highly subsidized in the U.S. It is an extremely cheap and abundantly available source of sugar. High fructose corn syrup has been an extremely cheap way for food companies to sweeten food. Now, why do they want to sweeten food? Homo sapiens have an innate preference for sweet. It's the only flavor, by the way, where our preference is innate, and that's been tested in neonates. Given a choice between sweetened and unsweetened solutions, we will gravitate toward the sweetened solutions from birth. The more sweet you get, the more you want. So if you have a population with sweet teeth run somewhat amok, and then you can sweeten the foods you offer them, they're going to like them more, they're going to eat more, and if you're in the business of selling food, that's going to look very nice on your bottom line. I won't name names here, but there are popular brands of pasta sauce that, matched for calories, have more added sugar in the form of high fructose corn syrup than ice cream topping. It's actually sweeter than fudge sauce you'd pour over your ice cream. And the only reason that that's not obvious to everybody is the pasta sauce also has a lot of salt and spices, and so the sugar is masked. The diabetic who may steer clear of the dessert aisle altogether may not have a clue how careful they need to be about choosing a pasta sauce. When all is said and done and the smoke clears, I think high fructose corn syrup is sugar. If there are any disadvantages of one versus the other, I think they're trivial, and they pale in comparison to what we know are the harms of just excess sugar in the diet. We address dietary pattern with all of our patients, but then we use a wide array of nutrients for specific therapeutic purposes. So, for example, there is preliminary evidence suggesting that chromium picolinate may help stabilize blood insulin levels. We use it, we've seen some very gratifying results. We routinely use probiotics in the treatment of irritable bowel syndrome. We use an intravenous nutrient infusion called the Myers cocktail, which is magnesium, calcium, B vitamins, vitamin C, for fibromyalgia, and have seen good results there. We're in the process of studying that as well. We've run the first placebo-controlled trial of that and have suggestive but not definitive results, and we're working on a follow-up trial. And arginine is an oral supplement that can help with that. It's an amino acid, so we are using arginine as one of our common treatments. We recommend fish oil to almost all of our patients because we're a population that is relatively deficient in our intake of omega-3 fatty acids for some very interesting reasons. Historically, we've domesticated omega-3 out of the flesh of animals that we eat. So, for example, the flesh of antelope that graze on grass is relatively rich in omega-3 and low in total fat. The flesh of grain-fed cattle has no omega-3, is high in total fat, and almost all of it saturated. So, what we feed our food has major influences on the nutritional composition of the food we eat. And so there are good reasons why we're all relatively omega-3 deficient. We compensate for that. And then in terms of specific nutrient-related tests, one of our more interesting results has to do with cocoa and dark chocolate. We've been interested in this for quite a while. There's a growing body of literature suggesting the health benefits of chocolate. Very nice to have a message about a food people love that loves them back. And that clearly is the case with dark chocolate. So with a cocoa content of 60% or higher, we're looking at a food that is one of the most concentrated sources of antioxidants available in our diets. And we saw more powerful beneficial effects of cocoa on blood flow than anything we've ever tested, including drugs. I mean, it was quite a stunning effect. So we just published that. And so where I think we're headed in that area is, we've reached the point, for example, with red wine, where the advice is if you are concerned about your heart, and you don't have a problem with alcohol excess, you actually should go out of your way to have a glass of wine with dinner. I mean, I think everybody's heard the recommendation, wine is good for your heart. I think we are very near to the point of making a specific recommendation, not just that it's okay to eat dark chocolate, but you should eat dark chocolate. It actually should be part of a heart-healthy diet. One of the things we have to work out, and one of the areas where I hope we'll make a further contribution, is defining what is the right dose. Because obviously if you eat too much, the calories become an issue, weight gain is a potential problem. What's sort of the minimal, if you will, therapeutic dose of dark chocolate? Talk about a medicine that's easy to take. But that's one of the areas where I'm pretty excited, because I think the message is just it's a fun one. This really is a powerful, heart-healthy food that people want to eat anyway, and nice to be able to give out that kind of recommendation. Food is the fuel the human body runs on, and when you consider that a growing child is literally manufacturing that growth out of the nutrients extracted from food, it simply stands to reason that the quality of diet is crucial to everyone's health.